"Please, my son needs help." Dolores Washington's voice echoed through Birmingham General Hospital's marble lobby. The white nurse looked at the black woman holding her sick 6-year-old son with disgust. "We don't treat your kind here. Go to the colored hospital." At Carver Hospital, the doctor's words were devastating. "Mrs. Washington, we don't have the equipment to save Tommy. Only the white hospitals can help him, and they won't take him." 3 days later, a mysterious letter reached Memphis. The handwriting was desperate. "Mr. Presley, please help. My son will suffer because of the color of his skin." Elvis read the letter twice, his hands shaking with rage. "Joe, get me a plane to Birmingham, tonight." Joe Esposito stared at his boss. "Elvis, if you break segregation rules, it could destroy your career." Elvis's response changed everything. "Then so be it." It was November 15, 1973, and Birmingham, Alabama was still a city where the color of your skin determined whether you lived or died. The Civil Rights Act had been passed nearly a decade earlier, but in the Deep South, segregation lived on through unspoken rules and institutional practices that kept black and white communities separate and unequal. Tommy Washington was just 6 years old when the pain started. At first, his mother Dolores thought it was just growing pains, the kind every child experiences. But when Tommy began crying in agony during the night, clutching his arms and legs, she knew something was terribly wrong. The local black community clinic diagnosed him with sickle cell anemia, a genetic blood disorder that predominantly affects African Americans. Sickle cell anemia causes red blood cells to become misshapen, blocking blood flow and causing excruciating pain episodes called crises. Without proper treatment, these crises can be fatal. Tommy's condition was severe, and the small clinic in Birmingham's black neighborhood simply didn't have the advanced equipment needed to treat him properly. Dolores Washington worked 3 jobs to support her family. She cleaned offices at night, her hands raw from industrial bleach and disinfectant. During the day, she did laundry for wealthy white families in Birmingham's Mountain Brook neighborhood, standing over steaming wash basins for hours in 100-degree heat. On weekends, she sold homemade fried chicken and cornbread from a small stand outside Mount Olive Baptist Church, trying to earn every extra dollar she could. Her husband Robert worked at the Sloss Furnaces steel mill, coming home every evening covered in soot and exhaustion, his lungs burning from the toxic fumes he breathed 12 hours a day. Despite their backbreaking work, they lived paycheck to paycheck in a small shotgun house on Birmingham's south side, where unpaved roads turned to mud when it rained and the smell of industrial smoke never quite went away. When Dr. James Crawford, one of only 3 black doctors in Birmingham, explained that Tommy needed immediate treatment at a major hospital, Dolores felt her world collapse. Dr. Crawford had seen too many children like Tommy suffer because of the color of their skin. He had watched bright, beautiful children die from treatable conditions because the hospitals with life-saving equipment were for whites only. "Mrs. Washington," Dr. Crawford said gently, his voice heavy with years of witnessing preventable tragedies, "Tommy needs blood transfusions and medication that we simply don't have here. He needs specialized care that only Birmingham General can provide. Without it," he didn't need to finish the sentence. They both knew what happened to children who couldn't get proper treatment. Birmingham General Hospital was the city's premier medical facility, a gleaming monument to Southern prosperity. It had state-of-the-art equipment, some of the South's best doctors, and a reputation that attracted patients from across the region. It also had a policy that was never written down but was understood by everyone. Black patients were not admitted except in the most extreme emergencies, and even then, they were treated in a separate, inferior wing that was little better than the underfunded black hospitals. Dolores gathered every ounce of courage she possessed and walked through the front doors of Birmingham General Hospital. The reception area was like stepping into another world, gleaming white marble floors, crystal chandeliers hanging from vaulted ceilings, and oil paintings of Confederate generals lining the walls. Fresh flowers adorned mahogany tables, and soft classical music played from hidden speakers. The moment she approached the reception desk, carrying Tommy in her arms, the atmosphere changed. The white nurse behind the desk, a middle-aged woman with perfectly styled hair and cold blue eyes, looked at Dolores with undisguised hostility. Her name tag read, Mrs. Patricia Montgomery, and her voice dripped with disdain when she spoke. "Can I help you?" Mrs. Montgomery asked, though her tone suggested she had no intention of helping at all. Dolores explained Tommy's condition, her voice shaking as she showed the medical records from Dr. Crawford. Tommy was barely conscious, his small body burning with fever, his breathing shallow and labored. Mrs. Montgomery barely glanced at the papers before shaking her head. "I'm sorry, but we don't treat You're kind here. You'll need to go to Carver Hospital." The words hit Dolores like a physical blow. She had expected this response, but hearing it while holding her dying son made it no less devastating. "Please," Dolores whispered, tears streaming down her face. "He's just a little boy. He's dying. Can't you see he's dying?" Mrs. Montgomery's expression didn't soften. If anything, it became harder. "The rules are the rules. Colored people go to the colored hospital. Now you need to leave before I call security." Other patients in the waiting room watched this scene with a mixture of discomfort and indifference. Some whispered among themselves, but no one spoke up for Dolores and Tommy. In 1973 Birmingham, witnessing the enforcement of segregation was as common as seeing the sunrise, and just as unquestioned by most white residents. Carver Hospital was Birmingham's designated colored hospital, located in the poorest section of the city. The building was decades old, with peeling paint and broken windows that had been boarded up rather than repaired. It was understaffed, underfunded, and equipped with medical technology that belonged in a museum rather than a modern healthcare facility. When Dolores arrived at Carver with Tommy, who was now unconscious from pain and fever, Dr. Samuel Washington, Carver's head physician, delivered devastating news. Dr. Washington was no relation to the family, but the coincidence of names seemed like cruel irony. Here was another Washington who couldn't save Tommy Washington. "Mrs. Washington," Dr. Washington said, his voice heavy with frustration and sadness, "I wish I could help your boy, but we don't have the equipment we need. We have no blood bank for transfusions, no modern pain management systems, and our laboratory can't run the sophisticated tests Tommy needs. He requires care that only the white hospitals can provide, and they won't take him." Dr. Washington had graduated from Meharry Medical College, one of the few medical schools that accepted black students in the 1940s. He had chosen to practice in Birmingham because he wanted to serve his community, but every day he was reminded of the limitations imposed by segregation. He had the knowledge to save lives but not the resources, while across town white hospitals had the resources but refused to use them for black patients. Dolores Washington fell to her knees in that hospital corridor, her sobs echoing off the dirty linoleum floors. Tommy lay unconscious in her arms, his small body fighting a battle he was destined to lose. Robert held his wife as tears streamed down his face, the strong man who had endured years of back-breaking labor brought to his knees by his helplessness to save his son. They were trapped in a system that valued the color of skin over the value of life. Tommy had perhaps days to live, and there seemed to be no way to save him. The wealth and medical expertise that could easily cure his condition existed less than 5 miles away, but it might as well have been on another planet. But sometimes, in the darkest moments, unexpected help arrives from the most unlikely sources. Dr. Crawford had a distant connection to the music world through his cousin, Marcus Crawford, who worked as a janitor at Sun Records in Memphis. Marcus had been Elvis's first janitor when the young singer recorded That's All Right in 1954, and over the years, he had occasionally shared stories about the famous musician's character and generosity. When word of Tommy's situation reached Memphis through this informal network of family connections, Marcus Crawford made a decision that would change everything. He knew that Elvis had a reputation for helping people in need, often anonymously and always generously. Marcus also knew that Elvis had grown up poor and understood what it meant to feel powerless in the face of institutions that seemed indifferent to suffering. Marcus sat down at his kitchen table on November 18, 1973, and wrote a letter that would alter the course of history. His handwriting was careful and deliberate, each word chosen with the weight of a child's life hanging in the balance. "Dear Mr. Elvis Presley, my name is Marcus Crawford, and I work at Sun Records where you got your start. My cousin is a doctor in Birmingham, Alabama, and he told me about a situation that I think you should know about. There is a 6-year-old boy named Tommy Washington who is dying from sickle cell anemia. 3 white hospitals have turned him away because he is colored, and the colored hospital doesn't have the equipment to save him. His mama is working 3 jobs and his daddy works at the steel mill, but they can't get their boy the help he needs because of segregation. I know you have a good heart and you help people when you can. This little boy is going to die because of the color of his skin unless someone with power steps in to help. Please, Mr. Presley, if there's anything you can do, this family needs a miracle. Respectfully, Marcus Crawford." The letter reached Graceland on November 21, 1973. Joe Esposito, Elvis's road manager and closest friend, was sorting through the day's mail when he came across Marcus's letter. Something about the careful handwriting and the desperate tone made him read it twice before taking it to Elvis. Elvis was in his study, playing piano and working on arrangements for upcoming recording sessions. The room was filled with gold records and awards, symbols of a success that sometimes felt overwhelming to the man who had grown up in a two-room house in Tupelo, Mississippi. When Joe handed him the letter, Elvis set aside his music and read carefully. The silence in the room stretched on for several minutes after Elvis finished reading. Joe watched his friend's face transform from curiosity to horror to rage. Elvis's hands were shaking as he set the letter down, and when he spoke, his voice was tight with emotion. "Joe," Elvis said quietly, "this is exactly what's wrong with this world. A 6-year-old boy is dying because of the color of his skin. That ain't right, and I won't stand for it." Elvis stood up and began pacing the room, his mind already working on solutions. "We're going to Birmingham, and we're going to save that little boy." Joe Esposito had worked with Elvis for over a decade and had seen him help countless people, often anonymously and always generously. Elvis had paid medical bills for strangers, bought cars for struggling families, and donated millions to charities without seeking publicity. But this situation was different. Getting involved in a racially charged medical case in Birmingham, Alabama in 1973 could destroy Elvis's career. "Elvis," Joe said carefully, "you know I support whatever you want to do. But we need to think about this. If word gets out that you're involved in breaking segregation rules, it could hurt your career badly. The South is still your strongest fan base, and many of your supporters." Joe didn't finish the sentence, but they both knew what he meant. Elvis stopped pacing and turned to face Joe, his eyes blazing with determination. "Joe, I don't give a damn what some of my fans think about this. A little boy is dying, and I have the power to help him. That's all that matters. Sometimes doing what's right is more important than doing what's safe for your career." The conviction in Elvis's voice reminded Joe of conversations they had had about Elvis's childhood, about what it felt like to be powerless and poor, about the responsibility that came with success. Elvis had never forgotten where he came from, and he had never lost his empathy for people who were struggling against systems designed to keep them down. "Besides," Elvis continued, "if my fans can't accept me saving a child's life, then they were never really my fans to begin with. They just liked the music without understanding the man who made it." That night, Elvis made a decision that would change everything. He called his private physician, Dr. George Nicopolis, and explained the situation. Dr. Nick, as Elvis called him, had connections throughout the medical community and could help facilitate the kind of care Tommy needed. But first, they had to figure out how to get around Birmingham's segregation policies without causing a public scandal that would hurt everyone involved. Elvis's plan was both simple and dangerous. He would personally fund Tommy's treatment, but it had to be done in complete secrecy. Dr. Nick would arrange for the necessary medical equipment to be donated to Carver Hospital, along with a team of specialists who would travel to Birmingham under the cover of a medical conference. Elvis would also travel to Birmingham to personally ensure that Tommy received the care he needed, but his presence had to remain completely secret. The logistics were complicated. Elvis couldn't simply show up at a Birmingham hospital without causing a media frenzy that would expose the entire operation. He needed to move carefully, using intermediaries and careful timing to avoid detection, but his determination to save Tommy's life overrode all concerns about personal risk. On November 22, 1973, Elvis flew to Birmingham on a private plane, landing at a small airfield outside the city under cover of darkness. He wore a simple black suit and dark sunglasses, nothing like his usual flamboyant stage attire. His goal was to remain unrecognized and to personally ensure that Tommy received the care he needed. The plan almost fell apart before it began. When Elvis arrived at Carver Hospital at 2 a.m., the security guard at the entrance recognized him immediately, despite his attempt at disguise. The guard, a black man named Samuel Johnson who had grown up listening to Elvis's music, couldn't believe what he was seeing. "Mr. Presley?" Samuel whispered, his eyes wide with shock. "What are you doing here at this time of night?" Elvis knew he had to think fast. He couldn't afford to have word of his presence leak out, but he also needed Samuel's help to get inside the hospital without causing a disturbance. "Listen, friend," Elvis said, pressing a $100 bill into Samuel's hand. "I'm here to visit a sick child, and I need this to stay between us. Can you help me with that?" Samuel looked at the money in amazement. It represented more than a week's wages for him, but what struck him more was the genuine concern in Elvis's voice. "Mr. Presley," Samuel said quietly, "are you here about little Tommy Washington? That boy's been all over the news in the colored community. Everyone's been praying for him." Elvis nodded, and Samuel's expression became even more serious. "Sir, I don't know what you're planning to do, but that child needs all the help he can get. I'll make sure nobody bothers you." Elvis made his way through the dimly lit corridors of Carver Hospital, following Dr. Washington to Tommy's room. What he saw there broke his heart. The little boy lay unconscious in a hospital bed that was decades old, in a room with peeling paint and equipment that belonged in a museum rather than a modern medical facility. Tommy's parents sat beside the bed, holding hands and praying quietly, their faces etched with exhaustion and despair. When Dolores looked up and saw Elvis standing in the doorway, she gasped. For a moment, she thought she was hallucinating from exhaustion and grief. "Are you?" she whispered, unable to finish the question. Elvis nodded and approached the bed slowly, his heart breaking at the sight of the small boy fighting for his life. "Mrs. Washington," Elvis said gently, "my name is Elvis Presley, and I'm here because I heard about Tommy. I want to help." Robert Washington stood up slowly, his mind struggling to process what he was seeing. The most famous entertainer in America was standing in their son's hospital room at 2 a.m., offering to help. It seemed impossible. "Mr. Presley," Robert said, his voice hoarse from days of crying, "what are you doing here? How did you even know about our boy?" Elvis pulled out Marcus Crawford's letter and handed it to Robert. "A good man in Memphis wrote to me about Tommy's situation. He told me about the hospitals that won't treat him, and about how you've been turned away because of segregation. That's not right, and I'm here to make sure Tommy gets the care he needs." Elvis sat down beside Tommy's bed and gently took the boy's small hand in his. Tommy stirred slightly at the touch, his eyes fluttering open. When he saw Elvis, a weak smile crossed his face despite his pain. "Mama," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "Is that really Elvis Presley?" Dolores, tears streaming down her face, nodded. "Yes, baby, it is." "Tommy," Elvis said softly, leaning closer to the bed, "I heard you've been having a tough time, son, but I want you to know that everything's going to be okay. Some very good doctors are coming to see you, and they're going to have all the medicine and equipment you need to get better." Elvis reached into his jacket and pulled out a small harmonica, one of his personal instruments that he carried with him everywhere. "This is for you, Tommy. It's one of my favorite harmonicas, and I want you to have it. When you're feeling scared or in pain, I want you to hold this and remember that Elvis Presley believes you're going to get through this." Tommy's eyes lit up as he held the harmonica, and for the first time in days, Dolores saw hope in her son's face. But Elvis wasn't finished. He turned to Dr. Washington and handed him an envelope. "Doctor, this should cover all of Tommy's medical expenses, plus the cost of new equipment your hospital needs. I want you to use this money to make sure no other child has to suffer because they can't get proper medical care." Dr. Washington opened the envelope and his eyes widened in shock. Inside was a check for $50,000, equivalent to nearly $300,000 in today's money. It was enough to completely modernize Carver Hospital's pediatric wing and provide care for hundreds of children. "Mr. Presley," Dr. Washington said, his voice shaking with emotion, "I don't know what to say. This is incredibly generous, but are you sure you want to do this?" Elvis stood up and placed his hand on Dr. Washington's shoulder. "Doctor, I've been blessed with more money than I know what to do with. Using it to save children's lives seems like the best investment I could make, but I need you to promise me something. This donation needs to remain anonymous. If word gets out that I'm involved, it could cause problems for everyone, including Tommy's family." What happened next was nothing short of miraculous. Within 48 hours, medical equipment that had been donated by anonymous benefactors began arriving at Carver Hospital. A team of specialists from Memphis and Atlanta appeared, claiming to be in Birmingham for a medical conference. Tommy received blood transfusions, advanced pain medication, and round-the-clock care from some of the South's best doctors. The transformation at Carver Hospital was immediate and dramatic. The outdated equipment was replaced with state-of-the-art machinery. The laboratory was upgraded to handle sophisticated blood tests. The blood bank was stocked with supplies that could save dozens of lives. Word spread quickly through Birmingham's black community that something miraculous was happening at their hospital. But Elvis's involvement didn't stop with financial support. Every few days he would return to Birmingham, always under cover of darkness, to check on Tommy's progress. Sometimes he would bring his guitar and sing quietly for the children in the pediatric ward, his voice filling the corridors with hope and comfort. Other times, he would simply sit with families, offering comfort and encouragement during their darkest hours. Mrs. Betty Harrison, whose daughter was being treated for diabetes, later recalled one of these visits. "I was sitting by my baby's bed, crying because I didn't know how we were going to pay for her medicine. This man in dark sunglasses came and sat beside me. He didn't say who he was, but he talked to me for an hour about hope and faith and never giving up. He left money for my daughter's treatment. I didn't realize until later that it was Elvis Presley." James Thompson, a father whose son had been injured in a car accident, had a similar experience. "My boy was scared about his surgery, and this man came and told him stories about being brave. He gave my son a scarf and told him it would bring him luck. That man was Elvis, but we didn't know it at the time. He just seemed like an angel who appeared when we needed him most." Tommy's recovery was slow but steady. The new equipment and medication allowed doctors to manage his sickle cell anemia effectively, and after 3 weeks in the hospital, he was stable enough to go home. His blood counts had improved dramatically, his pain was under control, and for the first time since his illness began, his future looked bright. On the night before his discharge, Elvis made one final visit to Tommy's room. The boy was sitting up in bed, playing with the harmonica Elvis had given him, his face bright with health and happiness. "How are you feeling, son?" Elvis asked, sitting down beside Tommy's bed. Tommy held up the harmonica proudly. "I've been practicing, Mr. Elvis. Listen." He played a simple tune, and Elvis's face broke into a wide grin. "That's beautiful, Tommy. You keep practicing, and maybe someday you'll be making music professionally." "Mr. Elvis," Tommy said, his young voice serious, "why did you help me? You don't even know me." Elvis was quiet for a moment, choosing his words carefully. "Tommy, there are people in this world who think the color of your skin makes you different from them. But when I look at you, I see a little boy who loves music, who's brave in the face of pain, and who has parents who love him more than anything in the world. That's not different from any other child I've ever met." Elvis continued, his voice filled with emotion. "I helped you because it was the right thing to do. Sometimes, doing what's right means breaking rules that shouldn't exist in the first place. And I want you to remember something, Tommy. When you grow up, I want you to help other people the way I tried to help you. Can you promise me that?" Tommy nodded solemnly, understanding that this moment was about more than just his recovery. "I promise, Mr. Elvis. I'll help people just like you helped me." Elvis smiled and ruffled Tommy's hair. "I believe you will, son. I believe you'll do great things." Elvis's secret mission to Birmingham had succeeded beyond his wildest dreams, but the story was far from over. Word of the amazing improvements at Carver Hospital reached other cities throughout the South. Medical professionals began questioning why black hospitals had been allowed to operate with substandard equipment while white hospitals received the latest technology. Dr. Marcus Williams, a progressive physician in Atlanta, heard about the Birmingham transformation and began investigating similar disparities in his own city. "What happened at Carver Hospital proves that separate can never be equal," Dr. Williams told his colleagues. "We need to integrate our medical facilities, not continue this charade of separate but equal treatment." A group of progressive doctors in Memphis, inspired by the changes they had witnessed in Birmingham, began advocating for the integration of hospital services. They argued that medical care should be based on need, not race, and that segregated healthcare was not only morally wrong, but also medically ineffective. The pressure for change was building throughout the South, but it took a dramatic incident to finally break down the barriers. In December 1973, just weeks after Tommy's recovery, a tragic event in Memphis accelerated the push for integration. A 7-year-old black child named Angela Foster was turned away from 3 white hospitals before dying in the emergency room of the understaff-funded black hospital. The story made national news, and the public outcry was immediate and intense. Civil rights leaders, medical professionals, and ordinary citizens demanded an end to segregated healthcare. Protesters gathered outside white hospitals, carrying signs that read, "Healthcare is a human right," and "End medical apartheid." The Memphis City Council faced enormous pressure to address the crisis, and the success of the integrated medical team at Birmingham's Carver Hospital provided a model for change. Elvis, who had been following these developments closely, decided it was time to take a more public stand. Working through intermediaries, he quietly supported the efforts to integrate Memphis hospitals. His financial contributions and behind-the-scenes advocacy helped tip the balance in favor of integration. While his name was never publicly associated with the movement, his influence was crucial in making change possible. By the spring of 1974, Memphis had become the first major southern city to fully integrate its hospital system. Black and white patients were treated side by side, with the same quality of care and access to the latest medical technology. The success in Memphis inspired similar changes throughout the South, creating a domino effect that would save countless lives in the years to come. Tommy Washington thrived in the years following his treatment. The quality medical care he received at Carver Hospital, made possible by Elvis's intervention, allowed him to manage his sickle cell anemia effectively. He grew up to be a bright, determined young man with a deep sense of justice and compassion for others, traits that had been nurtured by his brush with death and his family's experience with both the cruelty and kindness of human nature. True to his promise to Elvis, Tommy dedicated his life to helping people. He excelled in school, earning straight A's and graduating as valedictorian of his high school class. He earned a full scholarship to Morehouse College, where he studied pre-law with a focus on civil rights. His professors were impressed by his maturity, his dedication to justice, and his ability to see complex legal issues through the lens of human compassion. During his college years, Tommy wrote extensively about healthcare inequality and the role of individual action in creating social change. His senior thesis, The Power of Anonymous Intervention: How Secret Acts of Kindness Can Transform Society, became required reading in several social justice courses, though Tommy never revealed his personal connection to the topic. After graduating from Morehouse, Tommy attended Howard University Law School, where he specialized in civil rights law and healthcare policy. His professors noted his exceptional ability to understand the human impact of legal decisions and his talent for finding creative solutions to seemingly impossible problems. He graduated magna cum laude and immediately returned to Birmingham to open a practice focused on fighting discrimination in all its forms. Throughout his career, Tommy never forgot the night Elvis Presley risked his reputation to save a dying black child. He kept the harmonica Elvis had given him on his desk as a reminder of the power of individual action to create positive change. When clients felt overwhelmed by the injustices they faced, Tommy would tell them about a night in 1973 when a famous white musician proved that courage could overcome prejudice. Elvis and Tommy maintained a secret correspondence for years. Elvis would send birthday cards and Christmas gifts, always signed simply, "A friend who believes in you." Tommy would send updates about his progress in school and later his legal career, always expressing gratitude for the chance at life that Elvis had given him. Neither man ever spoke publicly about their relationship, but it remained a source of strength and inspiration for both of them. The full story of Elvis's intervention in Birmingham remained hidden for decades. Elvis never sought recognition for his actions, and the Washington family respected his wish for anonymity. It wasn't until after Elvis's death in 1977 that some details of his charitable work began to emerge. But even then, the Birmingham story remained largely secret. In 1993, 20 years after that fateful night, Tommy Washington was asked to speak at a civil rights commemoration in Birmingham. For the first time, he publicly told the story of how Elvis Presley had saved his life and helped change the South. The audience was stunned by the revelation, and many people wept as Tommy described Elvis's courage and compassion. "Elvis Presley could have lived his entire life without ever knowing my name," Tommy said in his speech, his voice strong with emotion. "He could have stayed safely in his mansion in Memphis, counting his money and enjoying his fame. Instead, he risked everything to save a 6-year-old black boy he had never met. That's not just generosity, that's moral courage of the highest order." The impact of Elvis's actions extended far beyond saving one child's life. The integration of Southern hospitals that began in Memphis saved thousands of lives over the following decades. Children who would have died due to segregated health care lived to grow up, have families, and contribute to their communities. The ripple effects of that one night in Birmingham continue to this day. Today, Tommy Washington serves on the board of directors of several civil rights organizations and continues to practice law at the age of 57. He still keeps Elvis's harmonica on his desk, and he still tells the story of that night in 1973 to young people who are fighting for justice in their own communities. The harmonica serves as a reminder that individual actions, taken in secret and without expectation of reward, can change the world. The story of Elvis and Tommy Washington reminds us that heroism doesn't always happen on stage or in front of cameras. Sometimes the most important acts of courage happen in hospital rooms at midnight, when someone with the power to help chooses to risk everything for a stranger. Elvis Presley may be remembered as the king of rock and roll, But for one family in Birmingham, Alabama, he will always be remembered as the man who proved that love is stronger than hate, that compassion is more powerful than prejudice, and that doing what's right is always worth the risk.